I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. Today I'm talking to Jamison and Lauren Malcolm. They led a large and thriving campus ministry in the Philadelphia church. Now, they lead a church and campus ministry in State College, Pennsylvania, the home of Penn State University. Jamison and Lauren talk about the development of the campus ministry after 2003, the current state of the campus ministry, and what successful campus ministries are doing to grow. All this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Jamison and Lauren, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. We're excited to be here.
It is great to have you guys. I've gotten to know you through my son-in-law, Felipe Marias. He moved here a couple years ago and was talking about Jamison Malcolm. And then Dom Munson had moved here prior to that, and he knew about you. And so it's enabled me to make a connection with what's happening up in the Northeast and your work there. So it's really great to talk to both of you guys. Now, you guys are living in State College, Pennsylvania. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Home of Penn State University.
Okay, the Nittany Lions, right? Penn State?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, now I just have got to say, couldn't they have been a little more creative by naming that State College? That's the name of the town? I mean, come on, guys. It's like...
You know, I feel like you're being a little critical right now. And, I didn't know you had feelings about this. I would have prepared an argument, but I was a little caught off guard by this.
I just go, okay, who were those guys that say, what are we going to name this city? Well, we've got the State College here. Let's just call it State College. Okay, let's do that. Okay.
I think it could be because Nittany is really hard for people to say. They call this area like Mount Nittany in the Nittany Valley, but a lot of people stumble on that. So I think maybe they just went for State College.
It was too hard. It was lazy. It was lazy.
Exactly. Okay. So anyway, back to it. How'd you guys become Christians?
You want to go first?
Sure. So I actually grew up in a church. My parents both grew up in believing households and had parents who taught them about God, loved God. But there were some things missing for sure. And so my dad's best friend from elementary school was studying medicine. He was in med school at Harvard, or in residency at Harvard, and he was reached out to, and he started studying the Bible with my dad through cassette tapes. First Principles cassette tapes. My dad was in Chicago also doing his residency. My parents were converted when I was 6 months old. So I was baptized in the Presbyterian church as a baby. Obviously, I didn't remember that, but I think for me, growing up in a church, I was always really inspired by what I saw in terms of how I really did feel like people were living out their Christianity and really living according to what the Bible taught and said. And my dad was a physician. He was ear, nose, and throat surgeon, but he also did ministry. And when I was about 6 years old, so we lived in Chicago. When I was 3, we moved to Detroit for my dad to complete medical training, but also they were planting the church in Detroit at the time. My parents were part of the planting. And then in 1991, they were asked to move to LA, really just for the reason to be trained in ministry. And so I was 6 at the time, and both of my parents are native San Diegans. And if you know anything about San Diegans, they hate Los Angeles, loathe it. In fact, swore they would never live there. So they ended up moving back to LA, or not back, but they moved to LA to be trained in the ministry. And when I was 10 years old, we actually were asked as a family to move to Jerusalem, Israel, to plant the church there. And my dad at the time kind of gave up medicine in order to be able to do that. And that was an incredible experience. I think that revolutionized, just it put skin on the bones of my faith. To walk the temple steps, to go to the Jordan River and know that's where Jesus was baptized, to swim in the Sea of Galilee. It made the Bible come alive. And I think I was at an age too where I could understand that. And it inspired me to really want to follow Jesus too. When we ended up coming back to Los Angeles a year later, which wasn't the original plan. And that was actually a really challenging transition, but I think it really helped me to have to really fight for my faith for myself. And it was during that time that I started studying the Bible and made the decision that, honestly, I think at the time I was going to a very, very wealthy preparatory school, and we were living in a part of LA that was a little bit rougher. And so I was a little caught between both worlds. But I think for me, it really showed me that heaven was my home and that this world wasn't going to be it. And I remember feeling like, man, if all life is about is working and, producing results, then is this it? Like, is this all there is? I felt like there had to be more, even as a 13-year-old. And so that's really when I made the decision that I wanted to make Jesus Lord. And I remember thinking about, man, the rest of my life, that's a really long time. But I saw the fulfillment in my parents' lives and other disciples' lives. And I knew that I wanted something deeper than just the wealth and riches and fame and kind of the lure of this world that I knew wasn't going to last or satisfy.
Wow. Okay. So what are your parents' names?
Henry and Lana Kramer.
Okay. There we go. I've heard that name before. Okay. So you are Kingdom Kid Legacy there.
Sure.
Okay, great. So do you have any brothers and sisters or?
Yeah, I have two sisters. One, Carol Ann Shapiro. She's married to Mike and Mary Shapiro's son, Rob. And they live in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I have another sister who lives actually in England, in London, Diana Mancu. Now she married a guy named Alex Mancu from England.
Okay, great. So, and so you're from primarily Southern California, and you ended up way up in northern Pennsylvania. I go, wow, where's the ocean there?
Sacrificing for the Lord. No, it's great to be here.
I love San Diego. That's a place Pam and I love to go to. It's nice. Little piece of heaven right here in the lower 48. But let's not get off track. What about you, Jamison? How'd you become Christians?
Yeah. So, it's very different than Lauren's story. So she comes from a very stable, generational type family. And without going into all the details and airing all the dirty laundry, I come from not that, and I love my family and love my experience, but there was a lot of dysfunction, and so I'll try to give the Cliff Notes version, but I think it's an interesting story, so I might wax philosophic a little bit, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
So my parents were divorced when I was a baby, maybe an infant, and so we kind of went back and forth, my sister and I, between my dad's home, and he was very religious, Southern Baptist, and so I kind of grew up there on every other week, and we'd go to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday. I think I even had like homework from church that I needed to do. And then my mom was not religious at the time. And so it was much more, we had a lot more freedom to do what we wanted to do. And it was an interesting sort of compare and contrast. But then actually, when I was in middle school, my mom became a disciple in the Athens Church of Christ and got married to a guy who she had dated previously before they were both Christians. And so I actually grew up around the church for my middle school years. And they ended up getting a divorce, and my mom was going through some stuff. And so I went to go live with her because I knew if I lived with her for high school, I could do whatever I wanted to do. And so that's pretty much what I did, whatever I wanted to do, but he stayed faithful, and, he and I stayed connected, even though he was now at this point my ex-stepdad. And so throughout high school, I was just partying a lot. I played sports, and so that kept me a little bit straight arrow. But by the time I was in college, there was no sports, and so I just partied all the time and did that kind of typical freshman college party scene, and realized pretty quickly I didn't like what I was doing. Dropped out. Went out to California and worked on this ranch, and was living sort of the dirtbag California cowboy lifestyle for about 6 months, and traveled around the country and blew all the money that I made. And then I came back to Athens, Georgia, where I'm from. And I wasn't really connected to anybody in my family at that point, except for my ex-stepdad, who at this point was now remarried in the church and had a couple of kids. And so I went to go stay with him in his basement. He gave me a job doing landscape and gave me a truck to drive. And that's how I got connected to Disciples. And so I eventually started studying the Bible. And I got baptized on campus at the University of Georgia in a lake at 10 at night on a Wednesday night. And it's called Lake Herrick. And if for anybody in Georgia, they might know about this lake, but pretty soon after I got baptized, they closed the lake down for swimming because the water was too toxic. And I like to say there was probably my sin left over in the water that made it toxic, and I shut it down. But that was when I was 20 years old, April 17th, 2002. I turned 40 just a couple months ago. And so this year is going to be my 20th spiritual birthday. So I'm pretty excited about that.
That's awesome. So, okay, couple questions. First of all,
yeah,
did you go to the University of Georgia?
Yeah, we both did.
Yep.
Oh, you both went there. Okay,
That's how we got to know each other.
They had a really big campus ministry there for a long time. Was Sam Lang leading the campus or the church when you were baptized?
So not when I was baptized. No, that was Sonny Sessions, who led the swamp camp for a while, or for a long, long time. And then that was in 2002, 2003. I think everybody on staff, including the campus minister and all of the campus leaders and stuff, they sort of either quit or left. And then that next year, Sam Lang came in and they hired Kevin and Elizabeth. And so they were our campus ministers for most of the time.
Kevin
Thompson.
Kevin Thompson, that's his son, Sam's son-in-law.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
yep.
Got it. Okay. All right. First of all, little sidebar. Athens, great music scene.
Oh, yeah.
Home of the B-52s, which is going way back to when I was in college in the 80s, and REM.
REM. I used to go to parties that Michael Stipe threw in this old abandoned church building, and it was weird. I'm not going to go into any details, but it got weird. And this was obviously BC days before as a Christian. But I will say Athens is a fantastic town. It was a great place to grow up, and I love music and local music and all that kind of stuff because of where I'm from. So yeah, Athens, great town.
Yeah, I've been there one time. Really cool place, very atmospheric, and just a very neat place. So that's awesome. Okay, so how'd you guys end up in the ministry?
Why don't you go?
Yeah. Okay. So after I graduated, so when I was in college, I was studying a bunch of different things, and I went on a Hope Youth Corps to South Africa, and it was my first Hope Youth Corps experience. And I came back, decided I wanted to work for Hope Worldwide, changed my major, and that became the ambition. And graduated the next year, and actually got a job with Hope Worldwide. And my first day at the corporate office up in Philly, just outside of Philly, Pat Gimple, who was my direct boss, gave me this flow chart of all of the corporate staff, and it was Bob and Pat, and then all the country directors and office directors, everybody else. And then I was at the very bottom. But the cool thing was, the really amazing thing was, my flow sort of skipped everybody else and went straight to Pat.
Wow.
And my office was just a desk that was outside of her office with a glass wall in between. And so I just got to watch Pat and Bob move and shake for about a year, and it was an amazing first job. and I got to travel around the country and visit a lot of different churches with that job and help organize volunteer corps and youth corps. And I asked Walter and Kim Evans if I could help out with campus ministry in Philly. And the campus ministry at that time was sort of rebuilding. And he said, yeah, of course. And Walter started discipling me. And that was an amazing connection to have with him. And so anyway, through those relationships with the Gimpels and the Evanses, they all sort of came to the conclusion, unbeknownst to me, that I should go into the ministry instead of work for Hope. And so they offered me that job and said, you got a week to decide. And I pretty much knew right when Walter asked me that that's what I wanted to do. Because I sort of thought now or never, like this is the perfect, I've always thought about being a minister full time, and this is the perfect time to do it. But I wanted to take that full week, And so that was in 2007. And the campus ministry was really small. And even, nationally, there was not a whole lot going on in campus ministry. And so I was flying blind a little bit. And at that point, Lauren graduated and had moved up to Philly. We were dating, and she got a job, really sort of a prestigious job as a research assistant at University of Pennsylvania, because she's a real smart girl, real good. And so I was working in the ministry. She was working at UPenn. And then eventually she was asked to go into the ministry. And do you want to share about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think, so for me, I think going into the ministry looked a little bit differently. Although I think what was helpful, I would say, is the summer before my senior year of college, I went to Monterrey, Mexico for a summer, kind of on like a mission team to help start a campus ministry at one of their elite universities called ITESM. It's Instituto Tecnológico de Estudios Superiores de Monterrey.
Wow.
It's like,
big name.
But it's like their MIT, basically. It was started by 2 MIT grads. And you couldn't even get on campus if you weren't a student there. And so there were about 5 or 6 of us. Most of the people were from LA, but it was kind of a ministry training experience. And we were really fortunate to learn from Kevin and Elizabeth Thompson, because they had the institute, the Athens Institute of Ministry was in Athens, Georgia, when we were in college. So we got to learn from Douglas Jacoby and from Sam Lang, and we got to go down and meet Chuck Lucas. And so I think that framework had already been laid. And I was still pretty reticent, I would say, to go into the ministry.
That's a total understatement. So was it when I decided to go into the ministry? So I think I told her that I had decided to go into ministry, and she started weeping because of her past experiences in LA in the 90s and all that stuff.
Well, I think so just to paint the picture, I graduated from high school in 2003.
Oh boy.
And this is now 2007. I'm graduating from college. Nobody is going into the ministry.
Yeah.
And it was scary, because I think I had watched a lot of leaders who I knew and loved. Some were doing fine and some were not. And it was hard. It was hard to watch that. It was hard to see, I was afraid of health issues, because I think I felt like, well, a lot of the women I know that had done it for a long time seemed to struggle with health challenges. And I was starting to have my own health challenges at the time. And so it just scared me. But I think what was helpful for me, so for sure I was fearful. Yeah. And I was very fearful. What was helpful for me is, I think I did feel called by God individually. Like, I think I didn't just feel like I was being called in the ministry because I was like attached to Jamison. I think, because I remember even when I was interviewing in Philly, someone actually anonymously donated money for there to be a campus intern. And the way God worked it out was just amazing. I had a great job, but they let me go down to part-time. I had just switched from part-time to full-time, and then asked to be put back down to part-time so I could do the ministry. And they were a little confused, but God worked it all out. And I think what helped me, I remember, was the Campbells, James and Kim Campbell, who are now in South Florida, but they were like, well, even if you and Jamison break up, like, would you still want to do this? And I remember having to really count the cost. Like, am I doing this because of Jamison, or am I doing this because I feel called by God? And I'd had careful conversations with Jamison about going into the ministry, because I was a very ambitious young woman and had a lot of career goals. But I also had tearful conversations with my dad about just not letting my fear be my driver and my Lord, really. I mean, just not letting that make the decision for me. And so I think it was really through those conversations that I realized I just needed to try and see. And if it wasn't the right fit, I could always get out of it. And I think I've seen that for a lot of younger people. You know, you can kind of get fixated on like, oh my gosh, if I make this choice, am I stuck with it for forever? Mm-hmm. Like, who you marry, yes.
Right.
Or, you know,
right. Stuck with me forever.
In a good way. But jobs, no, you know, you can always get out if you need to.
Right. Was it your ambition at that point to be a doctor like your dad?
No, I did not want to do medicine. At the time, I actually wanted to go to law school. I've always had like a deep desire to fight for justice. And I would call myself like a clandestine revolutionary. I love to study revolutions. I love to study what prompts people to reach points where they really want to like shake up the world and change things. I studied Latin American and Caribbean studies in college.
If we hadn't started dating her senior year, second semester, she may have just moved down to southern Mexico and fought with the Zapatistas or something, you know. I was sort of the direction.
I looked into it. Yeah. I did look into it.
So you must speak Spanish then?
I do speak Spanish.
Okay. So you went to UPenn. Now, okay, that's an Ivy League school?
Yeah.
That's like a private university, one of the Ivy League schools?
Correct.
Okay. So from that time, can you guys give us an overview of where you've been in the ministry? What happened and how'd you get to where you're at now?
Sure. So we went into ministry 2007, and then Lauren, I think it was 2008. Mm-hmm. We got married in 2008. And at that point, the campus ministry in Philly was, you know, sort of small. And so we were able to kind of ride the wave of momentum and saw a lot of really great things over the next several years in the campus ministry there. And that was a really amazing time. It was really refining for my own just character. So we were just focused on campus for several years. And then we were asked to lead a region of the Philly church in conjunction with the campus ministry. And so our last year or so in Philadelphia, we were leading a region in the western suburbs, about 200 people, and a campus ministry of 60 some people, and kind of bouncing between city and suburbs, and then the various colleges all around the Philadelphia area. So at one point, I remember spending like part of the day out in Villanova in the far western suburbs, and then driving to South Jersey to Rutgers, Camden for a Bible talk, and then going into the city at Temple. And it was crazy times, but a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And I remember a lot of angst and stress and anxiety and feeling like I wasn't performing well and stuff in the moment. But when I look back on it, all I remember is just what an amazing time it was. And so much happened. And I think we learned a whole lot during that time. And so then the church here in State College had been planted in 2007, and with Kip and Bethany Harms, who are now out in California, and they did a great job. But some difficulties arose. They had to move, and so the church here was without leadership for a few years, and sort of shrunk down to probably 15 people. And they were that way for, a couple of years. And so we just sort of had it on our heart. I mean, we came from a college town, Athens, Georgia. We came from a really dynamic campus ministry. And we loved where we were at in Philly, loved the people we were with, and loved our neighborhood in West Philly. I mean, it was just a fantastic situation. but just felt like there's probably other people who could do that job, and there were people raising up through the campus ministry ranks who could sort of take our place there. But we didn't see anybody else who was really sort of chomping at the bit to come here. And we felt like we were probably uniquely qualified. And really, we were both, we did an internship here where we were here for about a month. And we got some campus interns to work at Penn State, and it went really well. And after that, we were both thinking, man, we could move here and lead the church. But actually, Lauren's the one who said it. I didn't have the faith to say it, and she did. And I was like, yeah, you're right. We should move here. And so really, I mean, it was her sort of catalyst. And we talked to the Evanses, and they felt great about it. And we sort of had an overlap with the people who were going to take our place in campus ministry, Kurt and Christina Flinchbaugh. So we had 6 months where we were able to work with them, and then they took our place in Philly. We moved out here, and actually now the Flinchbaughs are leading a church in Lehigh, Pennsylvania. And so it's been a really great experience. And so we've been here in State College and working with Penn State since 2013. Mm-hmm. And we've been on the campus service team for most of that time. We've also always, I think since probably 2006, we've always been involved with Hope for Kids and the camp. And we're there almost every summer. Yeah. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about that when we start talking about leadership training and development. But that's a really amazing place. Mm-hmm. And then we've also done a lot of work with Hope Worldwide and been on the Hope Youth Corps planning committee and that sort of thing. And so we just really, really love working with youth. We love working with our peers and community members as well. But yeah, that's kind of our story.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. So you've been there since 2013. How's it gone? You're leading the church plus the campus ministry. It's like 15 people. Did you take anybody with you to like replant or to strengthen or augment what you had there?
Not really. So it was just us. And then we had one student from Philly who was transferring from a Penn State branch campus. So he ended up moving with us at the same time. And he and I became really great friends. And we sort of, we were able to really build the campus ministry around him over the next 2 years. And yeah, it was about 15 people. The first year, I think we converted one person, and, it was just really slow going, but we talked a lot about, I think the first 6 months, we just talked about repentance and sort of the joy of repentance and getting our faith back. And I think not only the church members here, I think we needed some of that too. For sure, we needed a lot of that. And so over the next couple of years, momentum started to build and grew the campus ministry. And we started, we became a host site for the 1 year challenge. And so we had 1 year challenge interns for several years in a row, which was very helpful just with numbers, just having someone to be on campus. And so over a couple of years, it went from 15 to about 40, the church did. And during that time, we were always sort of graduating more people than ever moved in, and that's part of the really difficult and heart-wrenching part of campus ministry is that you invest in people so much and you see them raise up and then you send them off. And so we've just had to sort of decide that we get a lot of joy from knowing that people are moving on to different places and having an impact there. And it's a kingdom impact, even if the sort of numeric, goal doesn't grow here.
Right. Because it's a college town. What's the like the metropolitan area? What's the population there?
So for State College, it's 40,000 people in the community, and then the university is 45,000 people. So the university is bigger than the town. And
my gosh.
Every one of our graduates has moved on to other places.
Wow.
There's just not a whole lot of industry here.
Oh, man, you've got to be so kingdom-minded, so giving. That's crazy. That reminds me of Marty Wilkinson down in College Station, Texas. He faces exactly the same challenge of a dedicated campus ministry town. That it's tough, really challenging.
The amazing thing, though, is that Philadelphia in particular, and then the ACR churches in general, have really seen this as an investment. And so even though this church here couldn't afford a full-time couple, the ACR churches have decided that this place in Penn State is worth the investment. And so financially, we get a lot of help from the outside. And We even just recently were awarded a grant from the ACR Mission Society so we can hire campus interns. And outside of all of that, sort of just collective support, I mean, it would be near impossible. But because it's seen as an investment, we help convert people here, raise people up, and send them off. So it's definitely a mutually beneficial thing.
Wow.
But without all of that support, we couldn't do it. Okay.
So let's just broaden the focus from not just State College and Penn State. You've been a part of the Campus Ministry Committee, a Campus Ministry Services Committee for a long time. You guys have been in campus ministry and church leadership for a number of years. What do you view as the state of the campus ministries in our family of churches right now?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And it's something we've been talking about both as a campus committee and when we were on the campus committee, but also we're part of the Next Generation Task Force as well. I mean, for sure, I think there is a huge, huge need to revive our campus ministries. Some have even asked, is it in crisis? Like what is the current state? I think that depends on who you talk to, But I think that there's definitely, it's been hard. I think it's been hard hit during COVID. I think a lot of campuses weren't even, open. We were fortunate here because Penn State did allow students to come back last year. And even though they had to be masked and a lot of classes were online, so it was still tricky. But I think that there's just a lot of turmoil is kind of how it feels. It feels like this generation and I feel a lot of empathy in my heart towards them because I can't imagine being in college and having my college years in some ways kind of taken away from a pandemic. Like half their college time is being, spent during the pandemic. So my heart goes out to them. I feel like it's challenging. I also feel like the world is a bit in crisis right now. Not a bit, actually, quite a lot. And I think that what I've noticed, I don't want to get off topic from your question, but I think, yes, I think there's a need for revival. I think there's a lot of people wanting to see more, but I think just not knowing how to make that happen.
Yeah, I think I like to look at, I'm a big picture person. And so Lauren helps me out a lot with the details, which I need. Otherwise I would just live in the future all the time, So when I think about the big picture, so I would say probably from 2007 to 2012 or 13, our campus ministries were growing pretty quickly across the country. And during that time, it was sort of a rebuilding stage, 06, 07, 08. And then we started to see a lot of fruit from that rebuilding in the early 2010s. And we probably hit a high mark as far as conversions nationwide in 2012, 13, or 14, somewhere around there. But then from that time until 2019, we were still converting people, but that number was a bit smaller every year. And then in 2020, all of us lost all of our momentum. And campus ministry is so much about momentum because you've got a semester to work with, so just short. A real short timeline, a year, or then you have people for 2 years or 4 years, maybe. And so we lost a lot of momentum. And so we're in another rebuilding stage, I would say, equal to that 2006, 2007 sort of rebuilding stage. But I can't say that it was all just the pandemic, because I think that probably just exposed some trends that were there already. And I've got some ideas about why that might be, but I think to try to answer your question, I think we are in another rebuilding stage like we were post 2003 and like we were in 2007. And we're back there where we need to refocus and re-energize campus, and church leaders need to reinvest in campus ministry and interns.
Okay, so that's a good segue into the next question. What are the most successful campus ministries doing, relatively successful, that need to be imitated? Which ones are doing well and why? What's working out there?
Yeah. Well, let me first preface by saying we stepped down from the campus service team at the beginning of this year, and we're able to appoint a younger couple to take our place in the ACR. And so we don't have quite as much of a pulse on campus nationwide as we would have maybe a couple of years ago. But having said that, there are definitely some outliers. North River in Atlanta has been producing a lot of leaders for a long, long time. They're converting a lot of people. And I think they've also experienced a downtick over the last 2 years, which is to be expected. But if you look at the trend of the North River Church, they've been very, very productive and produced a lot of leaders that are leading across the Southeast now. And they've been intentional about investing financially into the campus ministry and also doing short training programs, things like campus swap and internships and summer internships. And they've been very intentional about doing things that would build momentum. Right now, I think about the Boston campus ministry, and there's some reasons for that. But Boston last semester, they had a great fall, and in a lot of ways, they were setting the bar and doing it very well. But that's also the result of some very intentional leadership training, partnership, and funding, investing through the Boston Church and the Beam Mission Fund. And so one of the programs that has been really crucial, I think, to the Boston campus ministry is a program called Chance of a Lifetime. And it's a partnership between Hope for Kids and the Boston Church and the Beam Mission Fund. And last year was the inaugural year, actually. And so it was the brainchild of some folks up in Boston and some folks at Hope for Kids. And we developed this program. The big idea, it sort of grew out of the one-year challenge, except we wanted to do something that was even more intentional and with a cohort of people rather than sending one person to a place for a year. And so we, through a process, we selected 15 young people. They spent the first 3 months at Camp Hope for Kids, and they were basically full-time staff, and they trained in leadership and ministry and all aspects of running an organization and real hands-on leadership. And they also were able to build camaraderie during those first 3 months. And then they moved up to Boston, and they're working across the Boston campus ministries and regions all over that area. And actually, right now we're hosting Campus Swap here at Penn State, and two of our folks who we spent time with this summer at camp, who are Chance of a Lifetime folks, they're leading a group of Bostonians to come down here and encourage us. And it's been the best week of campus ministry that we've had in over 2 years. It's been amazing. And what they're about to do, the Chance of a Lifetime folks, they're about to go in end of May or early June all over the world and train and serve churches all over the world. And so some of them are going to be planting a church in Frankfurt, Germany. Some will go to Johannesburg, South Africa, and encourage the church down there. And then some will go to Manila, Philippines, and encourage a church there. And so programs like that, it's been very intentional funding, training, and also doing it as a team. I think that's a really important part, because just to be honest, it gets lonely on campus, or it gets lonely being a church leader in a small church. And man, we need that partnership. And so that's just sort of a survey of some of the things that I've observed.
I'd add on to that, or kind of just to emphasize that point too. I do think before the pandemic hit, we were able to go to Dallas and speak at a conference there, or a campus retreat there. And that was also really inspiring, because the Dallas Fort Worth Church has probably like 10 people in the ministry just focused on campus ministry. And I was talking to Kelly Smith about it, but they have funding that really focuses on training up leaders and putting interns into campus ministry. I think, and the churches that I know that are building their campus ministries are spending money on raising up leaders. And not only that, but the church leaders themselves, whether it's Tom Brown in Atlanta or Kevin Miller in Boston, really, or Todd Assad in Dallas, they really take a personal interest in building the campus ministry.
Yep.
And I think even Jamison and I felt that when we were in Philadelphia with Walter and Kim Evans. But I do think that it is important to really to put money, honestly, money
Right.
and heart and focus into the campus ministry.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you guys both have your masters already. And Jamison, you're going after more education. Can you talk about that and why?
Yeah, sure. So Lauren has a master's in clinical social work from UPenn, and she's the Ivy Leaguer of the family for sure. I just barely made it out of high school, and I was just happy to graduate from college, but I like to think I'm a late bloomer. So yeah, then we moved here to State College, and I connected with a professor in one of the departments here, and he and I really hit it off, and so I got a master's in it's called Applied Youth, Family, and Community Education, but it's really just sort of community development. And the way I think about it is it's ministry, and it's the stuff that we do at camp, and it's training leaders, but it's just the secular side of that, or the academic side of all of those things. And that master's was just a great experience. It was such a great experience. And through lots of prayer, God opened up doors. And Penn State ended up paying me to do the master's. So I was fully funded, plus they paid me a stipend, which was really helpful in a small church with small church finances. And I had this matrix basically of prayer that I prayed that if it was going to be good for me and good for my family and good for our local church and good for the church overall, that God would open that door. And if it wasn't going to tick all those boxes, then he wouldn't open that door. And he did. And it was an amazing experience. And I studied youth-led social justice research and was able to work with kids in North Philadelphia through Hope Worldwide and through Hope for Kids. And they studied, so we mentored these kids in North Philly basically through a research project, and they studied police and community interactions. And this was in 2017 and 2018 when that was all over the news. And so they did this really rigorous youth-led research study, and were able to present their findings to police officers and community stakeholders in Philly. And then we brought them out here to Penn State, and they presented on campus to a bunch of academics. And a lot of those youth researchers are now still involved with camp at Hope for Kids, and we've hired them as summer staff, and they're just doing really well. So it was such a great experience, and I always thought about maybe going back for a PhD, but with that same prayer matrix, if it was going to be good for me and us as a family and the church. And so anyway, we were on the road. We were going on a vacation somewhere. I can't remember where. Maybe just like a weekend thing. And my former advisor called me and was like, "Hey, what are you doing right now?" I was like, "Well, I'm just driving. What's up?" And he goes, "You want to come back?" Because I found funding. And so basically it's the same deal where it's full tuition. Actually, now our benefits and health insurance are covered through the university. And so it's saving the church a ton of money.
Wow.
And I have an assistantship where I get to teach 2 undergrad courses. And so I'm able to connect with undergrad students every day. I teach every morning at 9:05 a.m. And I teach a leadership and small groups class and communications. And I'm having a lot of fun with that. And then I'm studying, my dissertation is going to be on compassionate community development and compassionate leadership. And without getting all heady and stuff, basically I want to look at the factors that make up compassionate leadership. And if we can think right now in academia, compassion is studied as an individual concept, like how can I grow in my compassion? But it's not really studied as a community concept, like how can we develop as a compassionate community? And so I'd love to come up with a theory around developing compassionate communities. And part of the inspiration for that, I know I'm going long, but this is something I'm really passionate about. So part of the inspiration was, when God introduces himself, he calls himself the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God. And so that's compassion is the first word that he uses to describe his character. And so that's really, I think, important to me. And there was this other instance a couple of years ago in Philly. We work with an organization called One Day at a Time, ODAT. And it's a drug and alcohol recovery program in North Philly primarily, but they work all over the city. And it's one of the biggest recovery organizations in Philadelphia, I think maybe the biggest. And the guy who runs it is a brother in Christ. His name is Mel Wells, and he's sort of the mayor, unofficial mayor of North Philly, and just a real dynamic guy. And we brought the kids from camp down there, and they were doing some service, and we got to sit in on one of their group talks. And Mel was talking in front of the whole group of a couple of hundred people, and he was talking about this woman who had been sober for a year, and everybody stood up and was clapping, but there was one guy in the back row who was on his phone and he didn't stand up. And Mel, I couldn't believe he did this, but he stopped the whole thing and was like, bro, you need to get out, get up, get out. Everybody get him out of here. You're not ready. You're not ready because you didn't celebrate this. When you're ready, you can come back, but you're not ready right now. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. And he goes, look, that's tough love. That's how we do it here. It's tough love. And that wouldn't fly in an academic setting. Right. That's not inclusive. Right. That's not understanding. But in that setting, he knew that's what it took. And so things like that, I want to study what it takes to build a compassionate community in different settings. So anyway, sorry, that's a long answer, but you got me started. So.
Wow. That's awesome. For a person who's thinking about going back and getting an advanced degree, any advice?
What do you think?
Ask a lot of people who are in that career field first, because it's a pretty big, not just financial investment, but your time, your energy. And if you have a family, obviously there's other implications too. But I think what was helpful for me, even though I didn't like it at the time, is I felt like I had to be vetted before I went back to school. So I was in the ministry full time, and Jamison he wanted to know exactly how much it was going to cost. And he wanted me to talk to people who were in that field just to make sure that it was really what I wanted. And it was really helpful. I think it narrowed, because like I said, I started out thinking I wanted to do law school. And the more I talked to lawyers, the more I became convinced I really did not want to do law, because they actually all dissuaded me from doing law. Yeah. But social work seemed like something I could do alongside ministry. And it also is a wide field. So you can practice social work in a lot of different arenas. And so for me, I was able to talk to several social workers I knew, and that was really helpful. I think I was really grateful too. I did it part-time while I was doing ministry, and the Philly church supported me I did ministry part-time and school part-time. And that, I think it was stressful at times for sure, but I'm grateful that I was able to do both. Yeah. And I think both of us love education. I mean, that's probably why.
Right. You guys sound like you got to be learners.
We love to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we do love, one of our favorite things to do is probably just analyze the world and talk at night about different things we're learning and reading and hearing. Yeah. So I think it's part of our relationship too.
Yeah. I think too, a quick answer is like, well, we both wanted this, we wanted to get advanced degrees, which is kind of surprising for me. Like I said, I barely made it out of high school. I did very, very average in undergrad. And when I told my mom I was going back for a PhD, she was like, James, she calls me James, and she was like, James, did you ever think when you were in high school you'd go back for a PhD? And I was like, no, Mom. And then I go, hey, Mom, did you ever think that I would go? And she was like, no, I never thought, dude. So one, it became a desire. But two, as disciples, I think there's this freedom, but also like a obligation to make the most of what we've been given, and I don't think that means you have to go get a degree by any means. But I think making the most of every opportunity that we've been given, I think that is part of discipleship,
Yeah.
and these opportunities presented themselves. And in my mind, it's all related. Like what she studied, what I'm studying, it's all about building the kingdom, building healthy, sustainable communities, and helping individuals. And so for us, it fit. I don't think it fits for everybody.
Right.
But asking yourself lots of tough questions about that, I think, is really healthy.
Well, especially if you're getting the financing from the university itself to pay for you to go to school. I go, man, you must be pretty special. That's pretty awesome that they want to pay your way.
It's I don't think there's any, and this is going to sound like false humility. There is nothing special about me. I think God has blessed me with maybe the ability just to connect to people and be able to connect to lots of different types of people. And so my advisor at Penn State is a great guy and has opened lots of doors for me.
Wow.
And I that's all it is.
Okay.
He also had the faith, though, to ask. I think that's the difference. Like, I remember him telling me he was going to pray for a fully funded program for his master's. And I was like, there aren't fully funded programs for your master's. There's only fully funded programs for PhDs.
It's the first time I've ever heard of that before. I was like, what? A master's? Oh, my gosh.
But he had the faith to even think that it was possible.
Exactly.
And I just chuckled when it happened, because I think that is who Jamison is. He thinks in possibilities and not in constraints.
That's awesome. So, Lauren, you have 3 kids already. You've got 1 on the way. I go, yeah. Whoa, okay. How do you do ministry with 3 kids and being pregnant?
I try to maximize the time where I don't have my children with me. Because when they are with me, as case in point,
this is great timing.
Perfect timing.
This is Jordan, currently our youngest. Say hi, Jordan.
Hey, Jordan. Hi.
So, all
right, I'm gonna
so
go.
Yeah, I think I've really tried to maximize things like free childcare at the YMCA. But also we've had our kids in preschool, as soon as they were able to go a few days a week, so that I could have some freed up time. We are fortunate that our town is small and the downtown butts up against the university. So I can meet someone for coffee. In 3 hours, I can do 3 things, which is really unlike anywhere else I've ever lived in my life.
Right.
And so, but I think making the most of the time I have when I'm not with my kids, and then making the most of the time I have when I am with my kids.
Wow.
So
you seem happy. I mean, you don't seem drug out or, just tired. You seem really joyful.
Thank you. There have been seasons of ministry where I think I have been more on the tired, strung out end. And I think I've had to learn that, burnout is a real thing, and I have to take care of myself. Kind of like I have to have my oxygen mask on before I can put an oxygen mask on somebody else, like they tell you on the airplane. But yeah, I really do love doing ministry. I love that my children get to be a part of what I do in a way, and see the kingdom up close and personal. And I think that, ministry is hard in that it's not a job with built-in boundaries per se, but it's also great in that you don't have to have that compartmentalization.
Right.
In your life. And as a woman with young children, I really appreciate that.
Well, it makes me think about what you said initially. Back in the 90s, 80s, 90s, it seemed almost like there was a ministry pandemic sweeping the women's ministry leader ranks of chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, all sorts of immune deficiency. I mean, just crazy stuff. What do you do to avoid that?
I love sleep.
There you go.
And I always have, even in high school, even in college, I was never someone that liked staying up late. I wish sometimes I had that capability to stay up late and do stuff, but I think I think it helps me to, I like how I feel when I'm taking care of myself, and I don't like how I feel when I'm not. And so I think learning I have for sure had seasons where I've had my own health issues and have had to really take a look at my own stress levels. And honestly, even too, in the last year and a half, I've been part of a codependency group that has been really helpful and transformational and helping me to kind of recognize like where I end, like my limits, and that I'm not responsible for everyone and everything. And that I think just being emotionally healthy, I think in the ministry is so important.
Oh, absolutely. Never more now than right now. What advice would you give to those who want to make this life count?
Man, that's a deep question.
It's a very deep question.
So I don't think we have any kind of special knowledge. Let me just say that first. I think, any of the experiences that we've been blessed with are because of God and the kingdom of God, the church, the people he's put us around. Having said that, I feel like we've gotten to live so far like a really amazing life that I'm just very grateful for. And that doesn't mean it's always easy. Usually it's hard. But maybe that's okay too, being able to become resilient and work through hard things is part of it too. I think that there's a really great TED Talk by Simon Sinek that's pretty famous, and it's about finding your why. And I remember thinking the first time I heard that, maybe, I don't know, it's more than 10 years old now. And he's a pretty famous social scientist and speaker at this point. But I remember thinking that was really key. Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And what is it that I'm trying to accomplish in all these different avenues? And then I remember Lauren telling me about this experience that she had when she was interning in the cancer clinic at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital. And do you want to talk about that guy, the builder guy?
Yeah. I had this interesting conversation with a cancer patient who was high up in some pharmaceutical company. And he was an engineer, but he wasn't a chemical engineer. I think he was probably like a civil engineer. But anyways, I was like, well, how did you end up in pharmaceuticals? It doesn't really seem like, the same path. And he goes, well, I'm a builder. No matter where I go, I'm going to build things. And that just stuck in my head, and it stuck with me. And I think it's really made me think about, what am I uniquely qualified to do, or who am I, who did God make me? I know Robert Carrillo did a lesson years ago that I actually wasn't even in, but Jamison shared it with me, but he shared a line that said, only do what only you can do. And I think both of us have tried to live by that line, like only choosing to do the things that only we can do, and empowering other people to only do the things that only they can do.
Yeah. So I think about that sort of discovering the why behind what it is that you're doing. And also this guy who was at a point in his life where he was undergoing some very serious treatment for cancer, just saying, no matter what I'm doing, I'm a builder because it's who I am. And that hit me as well. And I think over the years I've decided, okay, so what's my thing? And what I think is I'm a community builder. That's what I am, and that's what I want to be. And so whether it's at camp or in North Philly or at Penn State or in the church or Hope for Kids or Hope for Wide or whatever it is that I'm doing, whether it's with my family, my goal is to build community and healthy, sustainable communities where people are healthy spiritually and mentally and emotionally and physically. And so again, it's a long winding road to try and answer your question, but I think finding things that you really love to do that also align with the things that we know God loves and even expects from us, and then just making the most of that and being really faithful that God's going to use each of us when we choose, that God's going to use each of us to do really amazing things. Because then you do start to think in possibilities rather than constraints. And so I think developing some, while seeking first the kingdom, developing some maybe deeper why of what it is that you're doing and what's the real motivation and purpose behind it.
For me, I see myself more as a healer, wanting to bring healing. And I think that, I just think it's important to figure out what your gifts are. And also, I think Jamison's really good at this, and he's helped me with this. And even to your point of like what helps me stay joyful, I think you have to do things that make you come alive. I think when life becomes drudgery and your like job becomes drudgery, and it's just, I don't think that's what God called us to. I think he called us to be co-rulers, co-heirs, and he he gave us the ability to really be co-creators in some ways of what we want to see happen in our lives.
Right.
So
there have been times in ministry. I remember when we were planning a church in Oregon, and I talked to Chris Schwarzenberger and Amy, and just tell them, I'm not having enough fun right now. Let's go see a movie or something. It's like you have to kind of check your own temperature, just kind of do a little self-diagnosis and just go, okay, I'm not as happy as I need to be right now. I better make some adjustments, not that happiness is the ultimate goal, but it is one of the indicator lights on your dashboard that you better pay attention to and do what you can to keep the joy level up and keep yourself moving in the right direction. So that's great.
Yeah. If I could just tell one more story to sort of
please
round out that point. I think so. Earlier today, I was in a Bible study with a student on campus at Penn State, and I just happened to meet him because he had a cool jacket on, and I was like, "Hey, that's a cool jacket." We got to talking, and I didn't reach out to him or anything at that point. But then I saw him with the jacket again, and so got another opportunity a few days later to reach out to him, and he's now been coming out to Bible Talk with Campus Swap, and so we sat down and studied the Bible today, and we talked about seeking God, and the first scripture we looked at was in John 10:10, where Jesus says that he's here to give us life to the full. And when I started talking about that, I see this guy who's like kind of a musclehead, he's a real smart guy, but very stoic, and his face lights up when I started talking about life to the full. And then we looked at Acts 17, where Paul talks about God determining times and places so we can seek God and reach out to him and find him. And we connected that with the idea of life to the full. And so if there is any advice out in this story for people who might be listening and thinking about how do I have life to the full? I mean, I think those two things are connected, like seeking, reaching out, and finding God in an ever increasing way is how we experience life to the full. And we were put here for life to the full and nothing less than that. And that looks different for everybody. And there's no one model for it. And that's the beautiful thing. But I think God really wants us to love our lives and love the experience of life that he's given us. And the primary way we do that is, seeking him, reaching out to him and finding him. And then being able to share that. I mean, I got to hear, so I asked him if he wanted to pray at the end of the study. And he was like, well, I've never prayed. So maybe you can teach me. And so I prayed first, and then he prayed, and it was the first time, it was his first words to God ever.
Wow.
And I got to be there for it. That's life to the full.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This was really a lot of fun, and I appreciate you reaching out to us and just giving us the opportunity. Thanks.
Yeah, and thank you for all your work with Hope through the years. I know that you counseled my kids and know them through that, and thank you for your influence in my son-in-law's life, Felipe. He's just
we love Felipe.
great guy and great family too. So
yeah,
love you guys so much. Thanks for your time.
Oh, thanks so much, Rob. Love you too.
Thank you so much for joining the Rob Skinner podcast. If you're enjoying this podcast, please hit the subscribe button and let your friends know about it and how to find it. Because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day and make this life count.